Hello and welcome to IP Study video lectures. Today we are going to discuss chapter number 1 of grade 8 social science. The chapter name is Natural Resources and Their Use. Now nature is very essential for us. It provides us with a lot of things that we need for our survival. It provides us with the trees, the air we breathe, the water we drink and the food we eat. Now, what exactly is nature? Nature is anything that exists by itself and is not created by human beings. So, yes, nature provides us with many important things. Hello and welcome to IP Study video lectures. Today we are going to discuss chapter number 1 of grade 8 social science. The chapter name is Natural Resources and Their Use. Now, nature is very essential for us. It provides us with a lot of things that we need for our survival. It provides us with the trees, the air we breathe, the water we drink and the food we eat. Now, what exactly is nature? Nature is anything that exists by itself and is not created by human beings. So, yes, nature provides us with many important things. But for these things to become a resource, and what is a resource? Resource is anything that has value. So, for things to become a resource, human intervention is required. Only when the human beings are able to harness those natural things, only then they become a resource, right? So, human beings are important, and that is why many say that human beings are the most important resource, because only they have the capability of converting the things in nature into resource. So let's discuss our first topic. What is a resource? We already discussed that anything that has value, that is able to satisfy the human needs, that is known as a resource. Now, for something to be a resource, 3 important characteristics are required. What are these characteristics? First of all, it should be technologically accessible. Now, what is technology? Technology simply means that we should know the techniques, the know-hows of how to use something. So, if something in nature exists, like there is sun, there is wind, there is water, if we know how to use these things properly, only then we say that they are resource. So, take example of solar energy. Only when we learned how to harness solar energy to make electricity, only then solar energy became a resource. Before that, sun existed, but we did not know how to use that sun's energy, so it was not a resource for us. So human intervention is very important. Acceptance. Now the society must accept the kind of resource that is there. Take for example, we have the technology of solar energy, of making equipment using the solar energy, but if these products are not accepted by the society, if it is not culturally acceptable to use solar cookers or solar panels, then that thing will not become a resource, because the society is not accepting it, they are rejecting it. So these things are also very important for something to become a resource. Now, resources play a very important part in our life. They are the foundation of human life and development. If we look around us, the water we drink, the food that we eat, the plants, trees, everything is a resource, because it provides some utility and make life of human beings better. Now, what are the factors affecting the formation of resource? There are 2 important factors. First is time, the other is technology. Now, it might be the case that something was not a resource 200 years ago, but it is a resource now. As we discussed from previous examples, solar energy, wind energy, they were not resources hundreds of years ago, because we did not know how to make them valuable for human beings. They existed, they had their importance, but we did not know how to harness these technologies, and we were able to do that with time. And it might be the case that something exists in nature at this point of time, but we are not able to make full use of it, and maybe 200 years from now, 300 years from now, that thing will also become a resource. So time is a very important factor, and time depends on technology, as we discussed, and also the growing social needs of people. Take example of crude oil. When we did not know how to make petrol, diesel, all these products from crude oil, these things still existed in nature, but at that point of time they were not considered important, they were not resources. But the needs of people kept on changing, the technology also improved, and we were able to make these things a very important resource for us. Similarly, we discussed about technology. So the technique of harnessing something is very important. Only then we would be able to use it in the best way possible. So this case study also gives the example of crude oil, which has been existing beneath the earth's surface for billions of years, but only when he knew the technology of harnessing it and making a useful product from it, only then we were able to use it. Now, let's discuss about the classification of natural resources. Now, natural resources exist in nature, and with human intervention, we make them a resource, we make them useful for our needs. And we classify them on different bases. The first basis of classification is their use. So on the basis of their use, they can be considered as resources essential for life, resources essential for resources for minerals, and resources for energy. Also, we can classify them based on their renewability, and on this basis we classify them as renewable and non-renewable resources. So let's discuss about these in detail. First of all, resources based on use. We have resources essential for life. So what are these? These are basically the water we drink, the soil on which we grow our crops, the wind that is required, the air that is required for us because it provides us with oxygen. So all these things which we require for our survival, air, water, soil, all these are essential for our survival. Without these, we will not be able to live. So these are considered as resources essential for life. Then we have resources for minerals. So minerals play a huge role in our life as well. They are metallic and non-metallic minerals, and we are surrounded by them. Everything that we use in our daily life is made up using some kind of a mineral. So what are these minerals? The examples include the timber that we use for building, the paper that we use, all the electronic items, means of communication, means of transportation, all these are made up using minerals as well. Construction, such an important part of modern day life. Roads, buildings, offices, everything that needs to be constructed is constructed using all these important minerals. Next comes resources for energy. Now, for different activities in our modern life, we require energy. For example, we require electricity for lighting up our houses, our offices. Then we also require gas for our food. Maybe we use electric machines by like microwave for that purpose. But again, that is also example of energy. Then for running our machines in factories where diesel is required or maybe some petroleum products are required, we also require energy for that, and also for our vehicles. So our vehicles are run on different things, maybe petrol, diesel. Today we have electric vehicles, but all these are some forms of energy. So for all these activities we require energy, and the things that provide this energy are known as resources for energy, right? It includes coal, petroleum, natural gas, solar energy, wind energy, hydro, electric energy, and so on. Now let's discuss about another classification which was based on renewability. So renewability simply means whether these resources are, we can say, rejuvenated in the environment naturally or not. If it takes a long time for these resources to be rejuvenated, then they are known as non-renewable resources, and if it takes a short time for these resources to regenerate and rejuvenate, then it is a renewable resource. So if we take example of soil, if we take example of rivers, lakes and groundwater and forest, these are some examples of renewable resources because they are in abundance in nature and they regenerate, they regrow, and that is why they do not cease to be. Whereas if we talk about the non-renewable resources, once we use them, they are exhausted. So there are many types of renewable resources. What are these? First of all, solar energy, what we generate from the sun, the heat and light that comes from the sun can be used up to generate solar energy. Then wind energy, which is harnessed using the wind that blows, and we have hydropower, which is harnessed using the flowing water with the help of dams. We use this kind of we generate this kind of energy. Then comes biomass, which includes wood, crop waste, animal dung and so on. It can also be used as, these things can be used as fuel. And then we have geothermal energy, which is energy from beneath the earth's surface. And we also have forests, which are part of the renewable resources because forests can also regrow by themselves. They are example of natural vegetation. Now, even though renewable resources can be regenerated and restored by nature itself, the speed at which we are consuming these renewable resources is so much that we are not giving them the time to rejuvenate, to regenerate. Now, what are the different human activities that are causing this problem? First of all, deforestation. We are cutting down so many trees for our modernization, for making our households, for our industries, that it is disturbing the natural cycle of nature. So, nature is not able to naturally grow the kind of forest that we are cutting down, we are destroying. Another problem is overgrazing. Now, overgrazing leads to soil erosion. If we do not check overgrazing and allow our animals, our cattle to graze the grasslands, then again we are disturbing the balance of nature. Another important cause is excessive use of groundwater. Now, we require water for irrigating our fields, for our industrial use and also in our households. And as the population is increasing, there is more and more requirement of water in our cities. But due to the overuse, we are not giving time for the water tables to recharge by themselves. We are using more water than nature is able to replenish, and that is leading to the problem of water scarcity. Another important problem is overfishing. Now, that affects our marine ecosystem, and when marine ecosystem is disturbed, it also has an impact on the, you can say, food web, and it also affects human beings in that process. So different problems have come because of the human consumption, increase in human consumption, and not letting the renewable resources to be restored, regenerated. Now let's discuss about the non-renewable resources. These also exist in nature, but they take a longer time compared to renewable resources to recharge, and they are different in nature from the renewable resources. These include coal, oil, natural gas. All these things are examples of fossil fuels as well. So these fossil fuels are made in the ocean bed in the millions of years. So if we can look at this picture, now this is the ocean this is how ocean looks about 300 to 400 million years ago, and with time, when different plants and animals also live and they die and their remains mix up with the ocean floor, we see that fossil fuels are made. And now, because they are fossil fuels, they are extracted from the ground and we are able to use these as resources. But what you can understand from this picture, that it takes millions of years for these fossil fuels to be made. So yes, they are regenerated in a way like renewable resources, but they take millions of years for that process, and that is why we say that they are non-renewable resources. Also, different metals that take a long time to be formed, because all these metals are found in the ores of rocks, and they also take hundreds, thousands, lakhs of years to be formed, and that is why iron, copper, gold, and aluminium are also example of non-renewable resources. Now, unlike renewable resources, non-renewable resources are different in terms of their nature. First of all, their cycle of restoration is very different. Renewable resources are, we can say, within a short period of time they are replenished, whereas non-renewable resources take lakhs and sometimes even millions of years for their rejuvenation. Also, once we burn coal or we extract oil, then it has effects on the environment as well. Burning fossil fuels is very harmful for the environment as it releases many harmful gases. So it leads to air pollution, it leads to even land pollution, because it is not good for the environment. Soil degradation is also another effect of it. So is water pollution. So since non-renewable resources are not replenished easily, it is very important to use them in a wise manner, in a judicious manner. So for this, we can say that the planning is very important. Resource planning is very important. If a resource is available to us, it does not mean that we should use it all up at this point of time. In fact, we should consider whether how much proportion we need to use now and what proportion we want to keep for the future generations. Now let's discuss about another important topic, that is distribution of natural resources. Now, natural resources are not evenly distributed all around the world. There is an uneven distribution, and we will look at, from the example of India, how different resources are present in different parts of the country. If we look at iron, now iron is mainly found in and around the Deccan Plateau, where we see states like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand. These have large reserves of iron ore. If we look at gold, then gold is mainly found in states like Karnataka, and it is not found in other parts of the country. Similarly, if we look at other resources, whether it is crude oil, whether it is coal deposits, all the resources are found in maybe one belt or in specific areas and not found all over the country. So that simply means that whether it is India or rest of the world, there is a very uneven distribution of resources, and this has many consequences. This affects how economies develop, how different states within a country have different states of development. We will discuss all that. First of all, let's discuss why there is uneven distribution of resources. So the first factor is the climatic conditions. So different places, different regions have different climatic conditions, and certain resources can only exist in a particular climate area. So that is a very important factor. The amount of rainfall, the temperature that exists in a particular region, that also determines what kind of resource is going to be available there. Another important factor is the topographical features. Now, if you look at mountains and plateaus, they have more reserves of minerals there, but when we talk about plains, they have the fertile land and fertile soil. So the kind of resources that they have is based on their topographies, and they are different from each other. Another important aspect is geological factors. So what are geological factors? Things like rock formation, things like the different processes that exist in nature, weathering, erosion, all these processes are different from one region to another. So let's take example of oil. Now oil is found in sedimentary rocks. So the places which have sedimentary rocks, we will find some kind of deposits of oil there, but we will not find them all around the or in other places, right? So geological factors also determine what kind of resources would be found at which place. Now let's discuss about the implication of this uneven distribution of natural resources. Now the distribution of natural resources greatly impact the lives of people that live there. Take for example, if there is a place which has very fertile soil and availability of water, then agriculture will be in abundance in such a region. Whereas if there is a certain area which has a lot of minerals, then we can see that industries will flourish in that area. And these industrial areas will attract people who would come there for work, for employment, and this will affect the growth of towns and cities which have these kind of minerals with them. So if you look at the growth of cities like Mumbai, cities like Pune, Nagpur, so they have grown because they are rich in minerals. So it's a very important aspect to understand. But it can also be a case that if there is abundance of minerals or abundance of resources that are found in an area, then that can also create problem for these areas. For example, that can lead to displacement of native population. So the people who are belonging to that area, the tribal communities for instance, they would be displaced from that area. They would be asked to shift to some other region, and workers from different parts of the country might migrate to these areas because of employment opportunities, and the industrialists would also be interested in setting up the industries in these regions because of the availability of natural resources. So in many regions across India and around the world, we see that even some sacred places, some forests, some rivers, they are being compromised. The religious values, the cultural practices of people have been compromised because industries are set up around these areas where resources are available. Also, there are some human and political factors that are also involved. Now, whenever there is a resource, there might be disputes among people on how to use these resources. So, we say a very important example of this is the dispute over water. So, whether within our country and even if we look beyond the countries, there is a conflict on sharing of the river water. So, within our country, we see that there is Kaveri water dispute, which is between Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Puducherry. So these regions have been fighting over the water of the sharing of water of river Kaveri, whereas if we look at India and Pakistan, they have conflicts over sharing water of river Indus. So it is through different treaties that we have decided on how to share the water, but it has been a major conflict between the two countries. So whenever there is a resource, there can be a problem of how to utilize this resource, because nature does not see any boundary. They are human made, they are created by human beings, but there are political disturbances, political conflicts over the control of these natural resources. Another implication behind the uneven distribution of natural resources is trade. Now, no country in the world has all the natural resources, and because they want to share their natural resources, they want to trade their natural resources with each other, we see that trade happens. And the countries which have more natural resources are at a position of advantage compared to others, because they are able to provide something to the world more than the other countries. Take for example of the Middle Eastern countries which have oil reserves, and oil has been such an important resource in the last century, and that is why these countries' growth has been so much dependent on the availability of oil in these countries. So the availability of natural resources in a country definitely impacts the kind of growth these countries will have. So that is another implication. But availability is not enough. You should also have the technology to harness that resource. So in case of oil, we can see that Western countries have helped these countries in the Middle East by making deals with them, and they have helped these countries to harness these natural resources. But what we understand is that there are many different implications of the uneven distribution. So it can lead to economic inequality, because some countries have these natural resources whereas some do not have them. Then it also leads to environmental damage. So if there is a lot of resources available at one place, then the environment of that place can also be compromised if resource planning is not done. And there is also conflict between communities and states or nations. So we took the example of water dispute within the states of India, and also between India and Pakistan. Why? Because there is a resource, but there is no political consensus on how to use these resources. So political disputes can also happen if it is not planned properly. So yes, resources are in abundance in nature, but we need to plan and manage them properly so that there is no conflicts regarding them. Let's discuss another important topic, and that is natural resource curse, also known as the paradox of plenty. So what do we mean by this? Basically, earlier we were saying that the countries, the regions in the world which have natural resources in abundance, they automatically have a position of advantage. But in many scenarios, we see that there are some countries in the world which have natural resources, but still they are among the poor countries of the world. They are struggling, their economies are struggling. And why does that happen? Because somehow these resources are underperforming. They are not able to make the full use of these resources, which leads to bad implications for these countries, right? So it simply means that these are the nations rich in natural resources, but because they are underperforming, because they are not able to manage these resources properly, this can lead to adverse consequences. So what are these adverse consequences? Stagnant economic growth. So their economic growth is not happening. There is problem of unemployment, or they are not able to generate enough jobs for their people. So that can happen. Also, heightened poverty levels. So there is large scale poverty in these countries if they are not able to manage the resources properly. And then there is political instability. So any country that is not doing well financially, it can also have political instability where different leaders come and go. They all promise that we will do development, but it is not happening because they are not able to manage their resources properly. So natural resource curse simply means that these are the countries that have a wealth of natural resources but are not able to use them properly. And as a result, they suffer from conflict and corruption. We see that there are civil wars in these places, education, healthcare, infrastructure is not developed in these places, because all these are the consequences of slow economic growth. Now, what are the other implications of this natural resource curse? there is over dependence on limited number of resources. So because they are not able to use all their resources, there is a over dependence on the limited resources that are present there. And as a result of the slow economic growth that happens in these countries, they can face even more problems such as over dependence on limited number of resources. So because they don't know how to harness all their resources, they would be their economy would be dependent on the limited number of resources. They are not focused on education, healthcare, or improving the skills of their people. So their economy is over dependent on the limited number of resources that are present. Then poor planning and management is another consequence of this. They are not able to take care of the needs of the people and manage the affairs of their country in a right manner. Corruption is another problem. Uneven distribution basically means that some people who have the who hold these resources, who are the owners, they would become rich, but majority of the population of such a country would remain poor. Then there is also neglect of sectors like manufacturing or industries, because they are over dependent on the natural resources that they have. They neglect their own industries, their own agriculture is compromised because they are over relying upon their natural resources and not investing in the human capital, in the education and skills of their own people. Now, India has managed to avoid this problem. India also have a lot of natural resources. As we discussed in the previous topic, we saw in the map that there are iron reserves, coal deposits in different parts of the country. We have gold as well. So India also has a lot of natural resources, but because we have planned it in a way that we are able to use these resources properly, and also we invest in our people to make sure that we are able to make the full use of the resources available to us. Now let us come to our next topic, and that is responsible and wise use of natural resources. Now it is very important that we use our resources in a judicious manner, in a manner that it does not harm our environment. If we are not able to do so, there can be severe consequences like environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. Now, what is environmental degradation? It simply means that the quality of environment, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the forest that we have, that quality is somehow compromised. That is environmental degradation. And biodiversity refers to the wide variety of life that exists. It includes us human beings, but plants, animals, insects, microorganisms, all this formulate the biodiversity. And if human consumption leads to the biodiversity loss, it means that species of plants and animals are getting extinct from the environment, and that has major consequences on our lives as well, our existence as well, because all forms of life in the world are interconnected. The entire ecosystem gets disturbed when we see that some species are getting extinct, because they might be the food for another species, and the entire food web, the food cycles are getting disrupted because of the biodiversity loss. So the entire problem that we keep on discussing is the fact that the restoration and regeneration of resources is not happening in the natural way that it is supposed to happen, because human beings are consuming more than what is required. They are not managing the resources in the rightful manner. So let's discuss about some of the problems that exist. First of all, we take the example of one of the major concerns for us right now is over-utilization of groundwater. So as we discussed earlier, groundwater is a very important resource. We require water for different human activities, for irrigating our fields, for industries, for for domestic use as well. So water is very important, but because of the excessive use excessive consumption of the groundwater resources, we see that there is a dearth of it. It has reduced in a great manner. And how can we make sure that our water is restored in the rightful manner? We have to look at practices like rainwater harvesting, rejuvenating ponds and tanks, building check dams so that we can protect water from flowing to regions where it can lead to floods. We have to check the cycle of water, then processing and reusing of water. So if it is possible to reuse water in some manner, for example, a very simple example of our household can be that we are reusing the water that comes from the air conditioners in mopping the floor. So simple ways like that can help to reuse the water. Adopting measures like drip irrigation, where one drop of water comes in the fields and that is absorbed, and only then another water comes. So drip irrigation simply means that we are not overflowing our fields with water and releasing it drop by drop so that it can be absorbed by the crops. So these can be some solutions. But let's discuss this case study which talks about the over exploitation of groundwater in the state of Punjab. Now, Punjab is a very interesting case study because it was one of the first states in 1960s to implement green revolution measures. Now, what was green revolution? Basically, at that point of time, India's population was increasing and we wanted to be self-sufficient in terms of the food grains that we have. So, our government invested a lot on a green revolution where HYV seeds, high yielding variety of seeds, were introduced, and they required excessive amount of water. They also needed chemical fertilizers. So as a result, we were able to increase our yield a lot. And since green revolution to today, our food grains have you can say the warehouses are overflowing with food grains, with rice and wheat. But the problem with the green revolution was its impact on the environment. So on one hand, we made tremendous progress in terms of ensuring food security for our people. But in terms of the environment, we suffered a little bit. So what problems came with this? The major problem was that our groundwater levels decreased a lot because tube wells were encouraged and the government also allowed people to use excessive water. Today, we see that 80% of blocks in Punjab are classified as overexploited. So the water levels in these 80% of the regions is not sufficient as it was supposed to be. Especially if we look in the southern and the central parts of the state of the Punjab state, we see this problem is even more, where the levels of water is not sufficient. One of the main reasons behind this was growing of the rice crop. Now rice crop requires a lot of water, and it can also grow in the regions which do not have water, but you have to provide irrigation. So that was the case in Punjab. Because they were growing excessive amount of rice, they required artificial ways of providing the water, and this led to the overutilization of the groundwater in these regions. Another problem that existed because of the green revolution was the soil infertility. Now, because chemical fertilizers were used and these chemical fertilizers were spread into the fields, and when they went to the water bodies, when this water was dispersed into the water bodies, it affected the marine ecosystem. This water, when it was in the fields, it also was consumed by human beings, and it led to different diseases among the human beings because there was excessive use of chemical fertilizers in these regions. So today we see that wells in many villages of Punjab have dried up Because of this problem only, the amount of water that has been used is more than it was able to be regenerated naturally. Now, to overcome these problems, the government of Punjab and the people from there are working on different solutions. Solutions like growing water intensive crops. So basically those crops which do not require as much water, they are being encouraged to be grown in these regions. Rainwater harvesting methods and methods are encouraged in these regions by the government, and then spreading awareness about efficient irrigation methods like drip irrigation and sprinkler systems is also done by the government of Punjab. So what is the benefit of drip irrigation and sprinkler irrigation? It is simply the fact that if we compare it to the traditional ways of irrigating the fields, these methods use less water, and in both the cases little water is released, and only when that is absorbed by the crops, then more water is provided. Now let us discuss what is rainwater harvesting. Now rainwater harvesting simply means that we are storing the rainwater for our consumption. We are not letting it go to waste. As we all know that rain is the purest form of water that can be available to us, and instead of letting it mix with the dirty water, the contaminated water, we are storing it. We can store it our rooftops, roads, other surfaces which at which this rainwater is being contaminated. We are storing it in different ways and at different places so that we can use it for our consumption. Now let's discuss about another important problem, another important challenge that we have, and that is the overuse of chemical fertilizers. We discussed this even in our previous case study that in Punjab chemical fertilizers were used in a large amount, but this is not just a problem with the state of Punjab, but the problem with the entire country, where we see that farmers have started using more and more fertilizers, because fertilizers are useful, no doubt. They lead to better crop productivity, but they have very bad impact on the quality of soil in the long run, and also they affect the marine ecosystem. When this water disperses into the water bodies, it affects the marine ecosystem as well. Now what is a possible solution for this? We have to adopt measures which are eco-friendly, which are sustainable. So practicing things like organic farming, where we know that we are using only the material which are beneficial for the environment in the process of farming, that is a major solution. Things like composting, using biofertilizers, so basically natural fertilizers, adopting crop rotation. If we have crop rotation, then we are allowing our soil to rejuvenate, because different kind of crops require different kind of minerals from the soil, and if we have more than one crop, then the nutrients in the soil would be restored, right? Because different crops are requiring different nutrients, so one nutrient is not exhausted in such a scenario. Also, avoiding harmful pesticides. Now pesticides are again important because the plants, the crops can be eaten by the pest. We need pesticides, but overusing them and using chemical pesticides is another problem. Then help in rebuilding the soil's natural richness by using organic farming methods, by using manure. All that is important. Now this idea of sustainable agriculture is not very new in our culture. Even if we go back to the 10th century, we see that Surya Pala's Vriksha Ayurveda mentions many techniques where farming is done in a way which is harmonious to the nature. Now, what is Vriksha Ayurveda? It simply means the science of plant life. Basically taking care of the plants and trees in a way that they grow naturally in the environment. Now, what all it includes? It includes enriching the soil. So the fundamental idea behind Vriksha Ayurveda is that if we take care of the soil, the life and the health of plants will automatically be taken care of. So how can we enrich the soil? We can do that by using cow dung, compost, plant waste and ashes. So all these waste which are natural in nature can be used. And how can we take care of the seeds? Well, we can use herbal paste, cow urine, all these natural things to improve the quality, enrich the quality of the seeds that we are planting in the ground. Also, this Vriksha Ayurveda explains different aspects of farming. For example, it tells us the details of the right timing at which the plants should be, seeds should be sown so that we can have a good quality of harvest. It also mentions the directions and the climate based planting methods. So depending on the climate of a region, which crop should be grown, all this is mentioned in the Vriksha Ayurveda. Also, for pest control, various substances which are in nature, which are abundant in nature, like neem, turmeric, garlic and herbal mixture should be used for that purpose. So the entire process of farming is done in a very organic way, very nature friendly way, and this has also inspired many of the people who are practicing organic farming in the modern day. Now, one such example is Sikkim. Now, Sikkim has implemented all these techniques of organic farming, and in 2016, it became the first Indian state to be 100% chemical free, and it had organic farming in all its parts. And why did Sikkim do it? Because Sikkim itself was facing with this problem of overuse of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. But what was happening because of this, the soil fertility was going down, and as a result the farmers' income was also going down because they were not able to grow good quality of crops on it. But as they practiced organic farming, we see that many positive changes happened. Yes, initially they had problems, and to overcome these problems, the government of Sikkim helped them. It provided support for the farmers by training them, spreading the awareness about how to use, how to inculcate organic farming, and also providing the organic input. So for organic farming, you require naturally available manures, you require the pesticides which are eco-friendly. So providing all these things to the farmers, they were able to practice organic farming. And as we discussed earlier, by 2016, Sikkim became the first Indian state to be declared 100% organic farming state. Now this was a major achievement, and it also helped the farmers' income. The farmers' income increased by 20% because of this, because their productivity was increasing in the fields. And we also see that the biodiversity of the region also increased. More insects, more type of plants, we can say animals, insects were present in these regions because the nature was, we can say, because we were respecting the nature in Sikkim, the nature also gifted us something. It led to revival of many species. It helped different animals and insects to breed in Sikkim. Now let's discuss about another important concern that comes from overutilization of resources, and that is industrial pollution. Now in many regions we see where factories and manufacturing industries are in abundance, we see that there are different problems that it causes to the environment. Why does this happen? There are untreated chemicals, toxic gases and even solid waste that pollute the air and also land and water. So all kinds of pollutions can happen if it is if it remains unchecked. Not only that, it also affects the soil in the region, which is contaminated, and because the soil is contaminated, the agriculture of the region would also be affected. Even we see that the dust from the industries, the dust and smoke from industries impact the health of plants that grow in the region. So several problems we can see occur because of this, and if we talk about the solutions, then we should set up effluent treatment plants. Basically, effluents are the liquid waste from the factories, and we should treat it before it is released into the water bodies. Then installing air pollution control devices. So the devices which are able to control the pollution levels, air pollution levels around the area, they should be installed. Then proper segregation and disposal of hazardous waste. So hazardous waste should not be just dumped into the water bodies or even on land, but it should be treated well, and it should be segregated well. Only when we are able to segregate which is hazardous waste and which is a normal waste, then we can decompose it, we can take care of it properly. Then regular environmental audits are important. The government agencies which are responsible for monitoring the pollution levels, checking the degradation, they should be auditing the kind of pollution that these industries are causing. Then shifting to cleaner technologies is a very important step, because we see with time, we understand that different technologies come, and some technologies are good for the nature and some are not very good, and we should replace the things which are not good for the environment. For example, we have replaced our petrol cars, or we are trying to replace our petrol and diesel cars with electric cars, because compared to the petrol cars, electric cars emit less pollution in the environment. And then also we have to create green belts around the industrial area. So green belts are basically large number of plants and trees can be planted around the industrial areas, so that we are able to manage the pollution levels in these regions. Now, cement industry is a very important case study when we talk about pollution, because cement industry causes a lot of pollution, and especially air pollution. Now, cement is a very crucial product. We see that all types of construction activities that happen in the modern cities, cement is being used. And if we talk about how much pollution that it caused, well, it has a lot of negative impact on the environment. If we talk about the main concern, it is the fact that it releases a large amount of carbon dioxide. In fact, 8% of the world's total carbon dioxide emission is because of the cement industry. So it's a very large contributor in that regard. And as we know, carbon dioxide is a major greenhouse gas. If the amount of carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, then it can lead to global warming. The world temperatures will rise up, and that will cause a lot of devastation, as it would lead to melting of the glaciers, and it would lead to flooding everywhere. The fresh water reserves will also be melted forever. So we do not want such a scenario, and this is why it is important to check the cement industries. And apart from the CO2 emission, it also has problems like dust, smoke, and other fine particles in the air are released when cement is manufactured in these industries. And it also affects the people. It leads to respiratory problems for the people who are living nearby the cement industries. The crops and the trees also get affected agriculture and plant growth is also affected, because we can see dust and other fine particles, the pollutants, they get coaxed on the leaves, and that leads to the pollution. Now, the Central Pollution Control Board has suggested some measures on how this can be reduced. First of all, they have instructed to install dust collectors and filters in chimneys, so the chimneys are able to filter out the pollutants that are emitted by the cement industries. Another measure could be treating the waste gases before releasing them into the air. Another important factor would be reducing emissions by using cleaner energy sources. So we have to switch to cleaner energy sources to produce the cement. Yes, cement is important, but we should move to the cleaner sources. Then managing solid waste and reducing water pollution from factory runoff, that is also important, that we treat the water that is coming from these industries and going to the water bodies. And we talked about the cleaner alternatives. What can these be? First of all, we can use fly ash, which is a byproduct of the thermal power plants. So thermal power plants has this byproduct, which means that this product is not the intentional product, but it is a byproduct of it. So it is waste, but it can be used for the used instead of this instead of cement. Then slag is also a byproduct. It comes from the steel plants. It can also be used instead of cement. Then there are also practices of making green cement. Green cement simply means that it releases, the manufacturing of this releases less carbon dioxide in the air. Then using geopolymer cement is another solution. Now it does not use limestone, which is used in making the normal cement. It does not use limestone, so that is another alternative that we have. In addition to this, traditional methods of construction can be used. Now, if we talk about the traditional construction methods, if you look at the houses that were made in the olden days, they used natural things like mud, lime, bamboo and stone for building houses. Now, these things do not harm the environment the way cement does. So, we can try to make our houses in a way which are not using so much of cement. So yes, we can say while cement is a very important part of our modern lives, of construction in the modern life, we can look at different alternatives. We can look at different methods of controlling the pollution that is generated because of cement, because we want a better future for ourselves. With this, we come to our last topic, and that is towards a sustainable future. So we have discussed in detail some of the major problems that can come with the overexploitation of natural resources, and because we want to avoid it, we need to make a judicious use of the resources that are available to us. If we look at how traditionally we have used the resources, we have considered them as gift of nature and we have used them without any discretion, overutilized them, and that is why we live in a world which has so many problems when it comes to pollution, environmental degradation. But we don't want our future to be like this, and for that we need to adopt some measures that help us to live a better future. So what can these measures be? First of all, we have to look at alternatives which are better for us. So instead of overutilizing fossil fuels, coal, petroleum, we have to switch to energy sources. We have to use resources which are not as much polluting the environment, which are more sustainable. So using solar energy, wind energy, hydroelectric energy instead of coal and petroleum, that is one option, right? And when we talk about our country, we have always tried to look after the environment, and that is why in 2015, along with France, we launched the International Solar Alliance. Now, what is International Solar Alliance? It is set up just so that we can encourage the countries around the world to move to solar energy, to harness solar energy in a better way and in a more cleaner way, which can ensure a better future for us. So the main aim of this mission is to promote solar energy around the world. Yes, we want more and more countries to develop solar energy resources with them. And another aspect is reducing the cost of solar technology and its processing and its associated financing, which simply means that not only we are encouraging the use of solar energy, but we are making it more economically feasible for them, right? Because we discussed earlier in the chapter that economically feasible is another important aspect. So only when it is economically feasible for these countries to develop their solar energy resources, only then it would be more culturally acceptable for people. More and more people would be able to use it. Another important factor is that helping countries work together by sharing knowledge and technology. So technology is a very important factor. If we are able to share our knowledge and technology with other countries, they would also be able to use these resources, and only then we would see that majority of the world is moving in the right direction, that they are using solar energy. So the headquarters of the ISA, International Solar Alliance, are located in Gurugram in India, and India has been very committed in this cause of encouraging solar energy use. We also need to address the fact that the resources in this world are not shared equally by people. There are some people in the world which have access to a lot of resources, whereas many people in the world do not have access to enough resources that are essential for their everyday life. So we also need to check the unfair distribution of resources. And only then we will make a world which is more equal and which is more concerned about the environment. Only when we have people that have their basic needs met, that they would be able to focus on the needs of the environment as well. So restoring, regenerating and making a sustainable use of resources is very important. What we can do for this, we can have very simple things like planting more and more trees, like saving water, reducing plastic use, conserving energy are the most simple but powerful steps in this direction. Now the Bhagavad Gita, which is a very important sacred text for Indians, it also mentions about the principle of Loka Sangraha. So what is this concept? It says that there should be well-being of everyone. And by everyone, it does not only mean human beings, but it says that all life forms should be benefited from our activities. So that is how we need to approach our resources as well, because this world is shared by everyone who lives in it, and our actions should not lead to consequences or negative consequences for other people. And we can all do that by making better use of the resources that are available to us. So I hope you understood this chapter, and we will meet again in our next video lecture. Thank you so much for watching.